Today is Black Friday, a day that's become synonymous with shopping sprees and crazy deals. But before we dive into our interview today, I thought it'd be interesting to take a step back in time and talk about the origins, because, like so many things, its history is much deeper and a little darker than we might realize. We're back and we're talking about Black Friday. And the term actually goes way back to the 19th century, but not in the way we think of it today. In 1869, it was used to describe a financial crisis caused by the gold market crash. Two infamous men, Jay Gould and James Fisk, tried to corner the gold market, skyrocketing prices. When their scheme unraveled, the market plummeted and chaos followed. That day became known as Black Friday. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the term pops up again, this time with a different kind of chaos. In the 1950s, Philadelphia police used it to describe the craziness of shoppers flooding the streets after Thanksgiving, combined with crowds heading to the annual Army-Navy football game. The police weren't happy with the extra work, traffic jams, and shoplifting, so Black Friday was their not-so-affectionate nickname for the day. But here's where things take a turn. By the 1980s, retailers saw an opportunity to put a more positive spin on the day. They started emphasizing the idea of businesses moving into the black, an accounting term meaning profitability, thanks to the surge in sales. And just like that, Black Friday became a shopping phenomenon. Now it's obviously grown into a global event. In some places, it stretches into days or weeks of sales. It's a reminder of how powerful the pull of consumerism can be and how much our relationship with material things shapes our behavior, even the way we celebrate the holidays.
Well, that was really interesting. I had always assumed that it was maybe a newer thing or newish, but that's crazy that it goes all the way back, way back. Well, guys, I hope that you had a very, very good Thanksgiving and we're excited to bring you this episode today. It's not necessarily a heavier topic, but it's an interesting one and a really topical one, which is like the funniest word I keep saying over and over again, but pretty topical in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. So I hope that everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Andie, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was so good. My family is turning into the family that does the turkey trot, which I know some people dread, but we had a ton of fun and we ate our heart's content. We had pies, mac and cheese, no cranberry sauce to be found at my house. And today is actually Trey's 30th B-Day. Shout out Trey.
Woo! Let's go 30.
30 30. But in other news, Lexi, how was your Thanksgiving? Spill all the tea.
Well, I think it's gorgeous and beautiful that you guys do the turkey trot. I'm trying to get my dad to do something called a jingle jog. He's not going to do it, but it sounds fun. I'm so glad you had a really good Thanksgiving. It's unfortunate you didn't have any cranberry sauce, though. That's -3 on the scale, so just so you know. But I had a really great Thanksgiving. A lot of my family is in town, and I'm just very thankful and lucky that my grandma cooks and I just sit back and I smile and eat. So very, very thankful. Today, we're going to kind of get into, I guess, the nuances of materialism and why it kind of matters in the grander scheme of life and how does that relate to near-death experiences. And although at face value they may not have any correlation, there maybe is something when we look a little deeper. So the tension between materialism and the deeper meaning of life after near-death experiences often arise from profound shifts in perspectives. Many individuals who experience NDEs report a reevaluation of their values, with things like material possessions and societal status losing significance compared to relationships, love, and even personal growth. Materialism focuses on the accumulation of wealth, possessions, and even external achievements, often serving as a measure of success in modern culture. But after an NDE, however, people frequently describe an overwhelming sense of interconnectedness and purpose that transcends the material concerns. This shift is often accompanied by a heightened appreciation for life's intangible aspects, such as kindness and spiritual fulfillment. And this newfound perspective creates tension, right? So, how to navigate a materialistic world while also embracing a deeper and more meaningful understanding of life. Balancing these priorities often requires reassessing life's goals, fostering gratitude, and seeking ways to live authentically aligned with one's transformed values.
Thank you, Lexi, for helping us connect the dots between materialism and near-death experiences. I feel like so many times people don't see how the two are related, but that kind of leads me into our interview today with Valerie Tate, who also is going to help us find the similarities between near-death experiences and materialism and how they kind of work in tandem. So Valerie is an intuitive therapist whose who's based in San Francisco. She also has her marriage and family therapist license. She works with a lot of couples and also individuals. She had a really interesting near death experience that awakened her intuition. So we're super excited to have her on. Without further ado, here is our interview with Valerie.
Valerie, thank you so much for being here with us today. We know our listeners are super, super excited for this interview. I have a feeling it's going to be a great one. So, I just want to start off. If you could tell us a little bit about your near death experience and how it kind of shifted your perspective on life. We'd love to just jump right in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Well, it was quite a while ago. I was 19 and I was having a routine tonsillectomy. Most people have them when they're younger, but I had mine at 19 and I went in for the surgery. Everything was fine, but I came home that evening and my throat started bleeding. Unfortunately, I had to be rushed to the hospital. And this happened a series of times where it just wasn't healing. And so at one point, they brought me into surgery. And in the surgery, I had the experience of I was under anesthesia, of course, but I had the experience of lifting out of my body. So I experienced myself floating above my body and seeing everything that was going on down below. So they were dropping tools, like all the medical tools and things on the floor and panicking. So I saw that, but what I was experiencing was just what a lot of people talk about with near death stuff is just this pure bliss, joy, like everything was perfectly fine. I just felt love and really like a kind of like a neutral observer, like, oh, there's me and they're having a tough time and I'm in this bliss state. And then I remember traveling down the hallway in spirit form and seeing my parents talking to the doctor. And I'm not sure how the sequence would have happened, but telling them what was going on and they had stabilized me. And then, I came back into my body and was in the hospital for another month. So I didn't go to the light. I didn't see any ancestors, but I was just in this state of being that was just so profound and so much love and so much reassurance about everything, about life, death, what happens. I just felt this sense of completeness and utter bliss, really. And so I remember coming back into my body and my parents were terrified, like, is she ever going to heal? Is everything going to be okay? And I just remember having this feeling of inner peace and looking at them and saying, you guys, there's nothing to worry about. I'm going to be fine. So it was like this sense of knowingness and really like an awakening of more perception. I do remember asking the doctors and telling him about it, and he got really nervous and just had a hard time validating my experience of seeing the panic. But then I did look back at the medical records later and it said like had a hard time intubating this patient. Made sense because they were trying to put a tube down my throat and heal my throat at the same time. So that was kind of the overview, was just like getting in touch with this feeling of the beyond in the most sacred way.
So, first of all, that's incredible. We talk a lot on the show about how with NDEs, every experience is unique, and yet there are some common factors that happen kind of across the board. Like the neutral observer looking down at your body, which must be an insane experience. I can't even begin to understand what that must be like. When you came back, you said you were 19, right? Just being a teenager, I'm sure already your worldview is, shifting as you get older and reach your 20s. But when you came back, was it like an immediate shift, or was it something that kind of happened over time as you reflected on that experience?
It's a really good question. I definitely felt different. I mean, I was in college, so I went into college thinking I'm going to go be a businesswoman. I'm going to work in advertising. I wanted to be successful and creative and all those reasons why I chose journalism. And I ended up following through with that. What I would say is that I remember dating after the NDE and I just started like hearing words behind words. I would know what a guy was thinking without him telling me what he was really thinking. I did also notice, this is more on reflection, but I think I became more experimental because I was very much like a good girl, followed all the rules. I was an athlete, I was straight A's, and I did remember being like more adventurous. It was like my favorite quote became, if there's an experience in front of you, have it. So it was like, I just was more in things like, yeah, let's go to Mexico and have a time and maybe date people outside the range of what I normally would. And I just started like, upon reflection, I had started living more authentically. Back then, I didn't really know what I was experiencing. And I could tell you more about my unfolding story of intuition, but that there definitely were changes. And then I had like a quarter life crisis working in advertising where I said, oh my God, this is soulless. I can't hear about people talking about white bread and why they want to purchase it in these focus groups. But I did want to know about the people themselves, what they cared about, what their soul wanted. And that was when I made the shift to become a therapist. So I'm a psychotherapist now for the last 20 some years.
That's amazing. What a pivot from advertising to psychotherapy. But it makes sense when you put it in that context. And that kind of leads me into my next question of, you talked about how your intuition opened up after that NDE. You already gave us some tidbits, but can you tell us a little bit more, not only about how it continued to unfold, but also kind of how your intuition shapes your life today and influences the decisions that you make?
Thank you for that question. It's become everything, really. I mean, I'll tell you from where I am now to going back, but now I really live moment to moment intuitively. So I see every moment, every person I interact with every day, even if it looks mundane or like what I know it to be, is full of clues, signs, information for me, for the other person. I see everything as a sacred exchange. And so I live that way completely. And I teach other people how to live that way. But going back in time after graduate school, I was introduced to this idea of training my clairvoyance, training to be an intuitive reader, a healer. And I thought, well, I've been trained in psychology. Do I really need that? But I realized that I needed to refine this gift that I had. It didn't just happen at 19. As a kid, I used to have a lot of precognitive dreams where I would dream about family members who were going to die and like what they would die from. And that was intense, right? So I kind of shut it down. But then upon the realization and the enhancement of those skills, I trained as an intuitive. And I learned all about energy work. And it was like taking a natural gift and then understanding how to utilize it. So then I took that into my practice and just integrated it, like teaching other people how to tap in. I often get messages and intuitions and imagery that I just sort of share freely. And then people pick it up or don't. It just woven in to my life experience. But it's most important to me to really teach people to recognize that everyone has these gifts and they come through different channels. And oftentimes people are having those experiences. They just don't know how to recognize, wait, how do I receive this information? And not just receiving it, but then taking action based on the information that is received. A lot of my clients, I'll say, oh yeah, I thought of this person, then they called. But they don't necessarily follow through with those things or take action based on the clue that they received. So I feel like that's part of my divine path, is to help people live this way.
I feel like I can relate in the sense where I'm one of those people where I'm like, I get a good read on people. Like I feel like I can kind of sense if someone it's not good or bad because it's never black or white, but maybe sense an ulterior motive or if it's pure intentions and things like that. So just maybe could you give like a little tidbit? I don't want to give away, your whole secret sauce and your whole practice, but for our listeners who maybe want to get more in touch with that intuition, is there one thing you would suggest or just one little piece of advice that could start them on that journey?
Tracking back to a moment where you ask yourself, how did I know what I knew? So what you just described sounded to me like clairsentience, the ability to feel others. So you can feel it in your body, or you might feel like an emotion, or you might even feel like a magnetism towards or pushing away from someone. So I think, how do you know what you know, or how did you know what you know at that moment in time? When you left your boyfriend or you decided to quit your job, or, like what were the clues that were happening then? And I always think of them as clues because I think of life as a treasure hunt that is like a series of unfolding clues for us if we're paying attention. So when you start to tap into like, what is your natural superpower in terms of intuitive channel, then you go with the strength first. So I'm also very clairsentient, like I feel people, and you go with the strength first and then you build upon that, like, oh yeah, what am I feeling now? Oh, my friend just came over and suddenly I was feeling fine, but suddenly I'm feeling this immense anxiety. What's happening, right? Start to work with that and ask your friend, like, I just noticed this feeling of anxiety in my body or my chest. Like, how are you feeling right now? And checking it out. And most often they'll say, I'm feeling kind of anxious. This really hard thing happened today. But that's a way of almost like using your empathy as a superpower, right? Like the ability to tap in. So I think, yeah, historical. And then from there, then it sort of like builds the confidence. Then you can start to say, okay, what about clairvoyance? Oh, I have imagery. I dream. I get images of things. Oh, I sometimes do have that inner voice that speaks to me. So I think it's strength building and then furthering out the education.
I love that. I feel like what you said is really powerful, like reflecting on those moments that stick out in your memory and digging deeper, because it's so easy to just pass it off as, oh, maybe it was just, a simple gut feeling, or oh, it was just, this or that, when there's really like that deeper kind of meaning. And I feel like on this show, we talk a lot about like keeping a journal. Last season, our theme was synchronicity. So like keeping a journal on synchronicities, but even keeping a journal of like an intuition journal almost, and reflecting, but also keeping track of like future moments of intuition would be really, really cool. Valerie, I feel like we have a good understanding of, your background and your journey. And I kind of want to shift to the theme of today's episode, which will be released on Black Friday. And as we all know, Black Friday, we really push the consumerism very heavy. It's all about shopping, deals, how much money can we spend, etc. So I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, and please feel free to let us know, but how did your NDE, if at all, change kind of your view on like wealth, materialism, and like this really big push to consumers, especially that I feel like we feel around the holidays?
That's such a great question. I mean, I do think that NDE and intuition in general shift me towards a life of more meaningfulness. First of all, I have to look at the conditioning. Should I send out a card for the holiday? Is it a should? Is it should I buy these presents for these people? If it's all coming from my mind, I'm not enjoying myself, and it's probably not going to be a great gift or really match something that is genuine and needed. I don't undervalue the physical realm. So just to come back to that, it's like the physical realm, we get to have physical experiences, emotions, we get to touch things, we get to play with like sports equipment and experiences. So I think it's meaningful, but it's really tapping in. Once you've gotten the structural part of, okay, do I have the money, right? Can I afford it? We do live in this world where money is the exchange system right now. Once you have that figured out, then for me, it's all about tapping into what is necessary and what is right for either myself or others. Like, recently I bought myself a hot tub because I've for life have wanted the experience of calming my nervous system in warm water, and finally felt like I could do that. I'm happy with that material possession. So I think really it's just about clearing conditioning from the shoulds and then tapping into what is, how am I moved? And not even going in order. Like, I couldn't stand the idea of having a shopping list of this certain number of people and then going in order. It'd have to be like, oh, I'm feeling this for this person who happens to be, on my list, but somewhere in the midst. Just more of the inner experience.
I like that. I feel like it's a fresh perspective, because I feel like so many people go to one extreme or the other, where it's like, okay, let's abandon all materialism. Let's abandon all finding joy in anything physical. And as, nice and peaceful as that may sound, I just don't think it's, number one, the reality we live in. And number two, it's like, I don't think that there should be guilt by taking pleasure in, like you said, buying a hot tub, because that's what brings you peace and joy and things like that. It's just maybe about the like intention behind it. And so I think that's a really, really great tip for our listeners and for me as well during this season, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in checking off that list of the number of people, how much, am I spending an equal amount on each person, things like that. So I really like that. Along those same lines, I also kind of wanted to ask you about the concept of having quote unquote enough, because that's something that I struggle with. It's so easy to like fall into that scarcity mindset of like, there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough this, and that. And the holidays, not only is time, stretched thin, money stretched thin, even though it's a joyful time for many, there is that stress. So maybe talk to us a little about not only your NDE, but your intuition, because that's a big theme kind of in the conversation, how that translates with the concept of having enough, not just in terms of like physical objects, but having enough in general, having enough happiness, having enough in life. What does that look like?
What I hear in your question is about currency, every kind of currency of love. It's all energy, right? Energy exchange of money and time and intimacy and enoughness. When you ask the question, I rise up to my head though. Like, if I am measuring and evaluating, do I have enough of this? What am I comparing it to? Am I comparing it to somebody else? Am I comparing it to my past self? Am I comparing it to something, a condition or an idea of what that looks like? I would come back to the same concept of like, where am I moved and how am I moved right now? Sometimes with the holidays, it's so flooding, right? We get together with 20 people and we think like, oh, great, it's this abundance, but then we feel flooded. So where is the guidance taking you? Maybe you're in a group of people, but you're feeling flooded and overwhelmed. Are you taking time to have enough alone time? So I think it's more of like a movement of what am I noticing right now? Okay, I'm going to go sit with myself. I'm going to go meditate or listen to my favorite music and get back in touch with me before I move into the larger group again. And of course, like if we're talking about enough in terms of survival level on the physical realm, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation that someone who doesn't have the resources and connections, they could start to call it in energetically, but that feels like even a whole other conversation. But in the sort of like privileged realm of having, the basics, I would guide listeners to start to really get into the sensing of where am I feeling out of balance? Am I too much in my mind and I'm not feeling my heart or my emotions right now? Then what are some things I can do to tap back into those parts of myself? Because that's what naturally balances us. I think when we listen deeply and then move from that space, have the awareness, but then also take an action to lead us to that so that we can get filled up in that area.
I like that you brought up, the concept of privilege because it's so right. Like, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like if we don't have shelter, food, water, I think love might have been one. I need to refresh my memory. But, if we don't have those basic needs met, then obviously having enough becomes more of a survival question. But I think where we get lost is once we do, okay, if we have that pyramid met, in one way or another, and then the concept of enough is just kind of this substance thing that we are constantly chasing. So I really did like your perspective and thank you because I know, like I said, that question might have been a little abstract, but I really like where you took it. My next question, I feel like we've already answered it within the great insights you've given us, but maybe just to lay it out in very practical terms, how do you think that, our society as a whole or people in general could benefit from just being more intuitive and having that awareness that you've been talking about?
I think the real shift that would make the difference is coming from sort of the conditioned mind oriented analytical thinking into intuitive sensing, knowing, tracking, and fulfilling. Another way to say it is stepping in from a fear of the unknown into like the engagement and the mystery of your own personal unfolding life, shadows and all, difficult situations and all. I just had a meetup with someone I was in relationship with, haven't seen him in 9 years, and had a completion experience, and it was intense but powerful. And I listened to my intuition throughout the whole process. So I think there's really an opportunity for us to just really feel more engaged in our lives, because even with intuition, sometimes people have like I got this flash that I'm going to be, living in Europe. This is one of mine in the future. Well, it's not right now though. And I actually know the timing is not right now. So I want to be fully here, having the experiences I need to have and not living into these even intuitive concepts of what's coming. So I think there's an opportunity for just a more of an engaged, fulfilling life where you're like, what's going to happen next? This is exciting rather than terrifying. What if I don't get what I want? Oh no, I'm never going to find that partner. It's just like a flip of the paradigm. Really from the mind. I like the mind. It's needed for structure, organization, analytical skills. But, I almost picture like if it's 60 to 40 mind, then just go the other direction, 40 to 60. And then your life is already that much more interesting, engaged, and exciting, curious, those kinds of words.
Something you said really resonated with me, like, essentially being curious about the unfolding of your life because I'm someone who I like that control. I like to know what's going on. I like to know, okay, what am I doing tomorrow, the next day, this weekend, next month? And that is rarely ever the case in life. This whole podcast, I feel, was kind of started from being curious of the unknown. Death is kind of the almost ultimate unknown. And so co-hosting on this podcast, listening to so many, incredible stories like yours has helped me kind of have that sense of curiosity of what we don't know, what we, have no way of knowing in some instances, how life may play out. So I definitely think that will be one of my New Year's resolutions, maybe even that I start now, is just having that curious, mindset and not being afraid of the unknown. So I appreciate that.
Well, just to come back to you, though, you're doing that by engaging in the curiosity of the show itself. Like, you're not just sitting there worrying about how death is going to be for you. You're actually researching it and letting your curiosity lead you. So, and some people like a little more structure and organization, but with intuition, it's like, what's that phrase? Like, we make plans and God laughs or something, It's like, yeah, we go, okay, well, yeah, I love the idea like I can look forward to that thing or this is my goal. But then intuition comes in and leads, and then you go, I surrender. That could be really fun and scary.
I know, like the freedom is scary, but exciting.
Yeah, let's make it exciting and curious.
So, Valerie, I feel like we've talked about so many amazing things in this interview, and it might be hard to, give our listeners just one takeaway. But if there's, that one thing that you really want them to leave this episode with, what is that for you?
You're never alone. You're absolutely never alone, even when it feels that way. Fear can make us feel like we're alone and life is scary. So do your best to shift out of fear and back into your intuitive clues and your sensing. For me, the more you build that, the more you feel connected to yourself and to everybody else. And also just working with hundreds of clients. It's like everyone needs community and wants other people and wants to open their hearts more. These are universal things that everyone's talking about. So, recognize that you might think you're alone in a problem too. And so many people you see that day are having insecurities and all those things. So if you shine your heart with love and availability, that will shift it immediately.
That was really powerful for me, especially just given everything that's been going on this year and factors in our world that are at play. Just being open, knowing you're not alone. And, I like what you said, leading with your heart with love and availability. I really like the word availability. Valerie, is there anything you'd like to promote as we kind of wrap up this episode?
Thank you. My website is valtate.com. So anyone can visit there. I have free quizzes. I have an intuition quiz. That's I think it's an intuitivesuperpowerquiz.com. And then I have an intuition course on my website. And I'm currently working on a book on intuition and everything we're talking about today. So eventually I'll have that to offer as well. But, people can reach out, send me a message. I do individual sessions, but also coaching for intuitive guidance too.
Awesome. We will make sure to link to that. And I will be first in line when your book comes out because that sounds right up my alley. So thank you so much, Valerie.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so fun.
That was such an incredible interview with Valerie. I want to thank her again for being here with us today. And Lexie, I know you weren't able to join us, so I want to hear all your thoughts on my conversation with Valerie.
The things I pulled and found influential from that amazing interview was that we all have and can be, I guess, in touch with our gift of knowing or our own clairvoyancy.
It kind of goes back to a theme we've explored in previous episodes, especially last season with the synchronicities. Everyone has the ability to recognize synchronicities. Everybody has the ability to harness their intuition. And it's almost like a muscle that you work out.
Completely. And I felt that she just drew a lot of really great conclusions and, like you said earlier, dots to that specific aspect of near-death experiences. I also thought it was interesting that she was having precognitive dreams as a child even before her near-death experience occurred. And that goes back to even season 1 when we talk about the paranormal effects that NDEs bring on to certain types of people. I also really loved, and I know you loved because you mentioned it in the interview, the point that she made about the physical realm and not undervaluing it and the tangible and physical life that we're living in right now. I thought that was such a profound moment because, we're speaking about Black Friday and consumerism and kind of just being with family. It's a weird dichotomy of after the biggest loving day of the year, then it's the biggest shopping day of the year, So I thought it was interesting that there is a connection there to the physical and the tangible also being important.
I like that her sentiment was not abandon all shopping, abandon all material objects, because I feel like we get that message so much. People still find value in buying a new TV, getting the latest sneaker deal, whatever it may be, as long as that's coming from a place of not just wanting, but something that you'll use or that will actually improve your quality of life, or really examining the intention behind it.
Be present for buying of presents. That's right. I snapped on that beat. Another thing that I really liked was her sentiment on letting curiosity lead you. A lot like Barbara said in the last episode, if we turn fear into awe, things will change for you. And just like Valerie said, if you lead with a sense of curiosity and not leading with that fear, you can have a better perspective on legit your life.
That's, I feel like Bright Lights Beyond summed up in a nutshell is leading with curiosity, turning fear into awe. And, whether it's fear of death, fear of even things in life, I think that's a message that we can all resonate with.
Absolutely. And the last thing that I got kind of from the interview was the universality of all things. And so I was at a bar this weekend with my friends and we were talking about religion and life. And honestly, we were talking about the IRA, which is the Irish Republican Army. And if that's something you want to learn about, you DM me. One of the many topics that we discussed over a pint of Guinness, if you will, was the universality of what's next. Throughout all NDEs and honestly throughout all of history of NDEs, people have talked about there being a oneness, and that when we die, it's not the end. I don't even necessarily know if it's a heaven or hell or, a reincarnation, but it's somewhere where people feel love. And that was something that I got from Valerie speaking about her own death experience. She maybe didn't see a tunnel or have a life review, but she felt the oneness and the universality of like there is another place or another thing and that we're all connected. So that was like the biggest takeaway I took from this, that the physical world, the consumerism of life, whatever else, is also combined with like the oneness of the universe and where we all go when we're gone.
First of all, I learned a new word from you today, Lexie, universality. So you kind of schooled me there. If you see me saying universality on Instagram or in my day-to-day, don't clock me. And I learned a lot from this interview with Valerie. It was so much fun talking to you, and we'll link your website in the show notes and tag you on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. And we will catch you in the next one.
Happy shopping, and as always, live life beyond.